to make sure that the mentally ill, criminals, terrorists don't have access to any firearm. Doesn't matter whether it looks really scary or if it looks the opposite of really scary. Regardless of looks, no one who is mentally ill, a criminal, or a terrorist should ever be able to have access to a firearm. We also have to be smart with the use of quote-unquote gun-free zones. If you want to have a gun-free America as your goal, what's happening is that they've been enacting these gun-free zones, and in Chattanooga, Tennessee, our Army recruiting station, they weren't allowed to carry firearms. In Aurora, where a movie theater was shot up, the shooter went to the gun-free movie theater and passed 2 other movie theaters that weren't gun-free. Now, as far as the debate over assault weapons or assault rifles, I go to different venues and people give me different definitions as to what exactly they're asking for. Assault weapons, you can't manufacture, it's been decades, you can't manufacture assault weapons. Assault rifles, how do you define it? So you take a rifle, New York State defined it, where you take a rifle and you add a flash suppressor or a muzzle compressor or a collapsible buttstock or a pistol grip or a thumb grip. And by adding one of those features, it's now called an assault rifle because it looks scarier. In order to have good public policy, you need to be able to willing to sit down with people who may disagree with you, but to enact better policy. And that's an important question on the assault rifle piece, is what the definition is.
One of the questions that they asked you to address was, how do you feel about improving background checks?
Yeah, we right now have a massive flaw in our background check process. We prosecute a very small percentage of the attempted illegal purchases of firearms. And you can, there are laws on the books right now, and you can enact new laws. But the fact is, if the laws that are on the books right now, if you only prosecute just over 500 cases when you have tens of thousands of attempted illegal purchases, there's a huge issue with background checks. And by the way, I, as a member of Congress, meet with the FBI director, I meet with the Secretary of Homeland Security, I meet with the Director of National Intelligence. We ask questions related to funding. And from the director of FBI's mouth directly, he says we are not requesting additional funding. But we have to figure out with the Department of Justice what they need in order to crack down on the attempted illegal purchases.
I don't know what number debate this is, but the skating and slip sliding around this issue is almost comical to me. Yeah, no member of Congress wants to see guns in the hands of terrorists, yet they have a perfect opportunity to do something about it. And Lee Zeldin leads the way 28 times on preventing legislation coming forward called no fly, no buy. Simple common sense would not allow people on the terrorist watch list who are today not permitted to fly commercially from buying guns. Now you will hear him skate around that wasn't the bills and I have it right here, voted 28 times. Just ask him that question. Have you not voted 28 times not to permit the bill to come forward and a discussion on the floor of the House of Representatives to take guns out of the hands of terrorists through the no fly, no buy? The simple answer is yes, he has done that 28 times. We are in a crisis situation today. And the bill that Mr. Zeldin has put forward is happily supported by the NRA, but it is not supported by law enforcement around this country. Why? Because it puts the onus on the FBI and on the government to prove that someone may be at risk here, instead of putting the onus on those that are selling the guns. And when we're talking about enforcement here, today any American can go on the internet and buy any kind of ammunition and not be subject to background checks, because that is a loophole that is still very much out there and untouched. These are simple things that need to get done, but because our Congress is so mired in dysfunction under people like Lee Zeldin, they are not happening And kids and Americans are at risk every single day like nowhere else.
Well, so if any of you have seen my opponent's TV ad on this, she actually puts the 25 different votes that she claims were votes against Pete King's bill to prevent terrorists from being able to purchase firearms. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm not asking you to visit my website. I'm asking you on your own to look at her ad and read the 25 votes that she lists on her ad, and then go into your computer and visit any website that pops up. And you will find that all 25 votes have absolutely nothing at all to do with guns. So the top priority here in Suffolk is to combat the heroin opioid abuse epidemic. HRES 809, the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, yeah, I co-sponsored it. Yeah, I had multiple press conferences in the district to push it. And it's been a top priority of everyone advocating for tackling the heroin opioid abuse epidemic. And who would have thought that fast forward to October, we would be at a debate, or our TVs would be filled with attacking me, saying that that's a vote against Pete King's bill. By the way, Pete King voted the same way that I did on all 25 of those bills listed on that ad. I'm not asking you to take my word for it or to visit my website. Look at her ad yourself and search the internet yourself, and you'll find that is a flat-out lie.
This is the height of political disingenuousness, okay? 28 times he is counting on the fact that most Americans do not know what a procedural vote looks like in the House of Representatives. That gives any member of Congress the ability, when a bill that is on the floor has been voted down, to before that ask for a procedural vote to bring forward something that they believe is of higher priority. 28 times members of Congress asked for that procedural vote. I have them right here circled. Yes, the bills that preceded them were not related to gun violence, but 28 times members of Congress said, this is of higher priority, we need to talk about it. And 28 times Mr. Zeldin was part of a majority, including Peter King, that's how cynical that is, to vote down his own bill. And I want to say about the Opioid Act, yes, it was important, but not important enough to vote to bring forward the appropriations for it, so it remains unfunded.
Okay, Anna, you get your own question here. This question is for you. You've criticized Mr. Zeldin for his support of Mr. Trump, yet you've supported Mrs. Clinton in spite of the email scandal, Clinton Foundation practices, her abuse of women, attacked by her husband, etc. I don't know, I can't read the first word. Do any of these issues give you pause, or her policy choices, like bringing in hundreds of thousands of refugees from the chaos in the Middle East?
Where to start? So we have an individual running for the White House today that has, over years, sexually abused women and makes no bones of it and calls it locker room talk. Well, I'm the mother of 4 athletes who can tell you, and they have spent more time in locker rooms than I believe Mr. Trump ever has or ever will, and perhaps Mr. Zeldin too. But they are offended at the idea that that is called locker room talk, because they have never heard locker room banter like that. And if they had, they would have stood up to it. And not only that, it attempts to make it so that all men are okay with this. Well, no man I know is okay with this. And yeah, I'm happy to answer the question. Do I think that a man like that, that speaks disparaging of Gold Star families, that puts a whole nationality across the board as criminals and rapists, has any business running for president of this country? And the fact that Mr. Zeldin's moral compass is so off that he will troll for votes, thinking that the Trump base will vote for him as he stays with him, but doesn't, as a father and a husband, speak up for the fact that someone who makes just brag out of abusing women is okay, that to me is a real issue, and it goes way beyond anything else.
Would you like? I suspect you'd like to.
Yeah,
say
I mean, I'll
something.
tell you, there's no question that you can ask me that would get me to pivot and attack my opponent as far as her as a mother or her as a spouse. And to be asked a substantive question from someone in this crowd on whether or not anything that happens to be a flaw or an imperfection in her own candidate gives her pause, or on policy, what she might have an issue with. That instead of answering that, you're going to attack me as a husband, you're going to attack me as a father, and you're going to bring my family into it. It's disgusting. Just answer the question. I would never, in a million years, or any campaign against any opponent, ever try to take a question that's directed to me and turn it into an attack on my opponent, on her as a spouse or as a mother. I would never do it. It's disgusting.
Hang on just a sec. Would you like to take another crack at answering some of these questions?
I'm happy to. I'm happy to, because first of all, I just want to say, as elected officials, we, I believe, are held to the highest standards. And when we are held to the highest standards, that means that we can hold our heads up high and say, these are things that we believe in. This is behavior, moral compass, call it what you like, that is what our constituents, our kids, our neighbors and friends and family should also believe are right. Doesn't mean that we can't disagree on policy, but there is morality in this. And there is setting example in this. And do I think that Hillary Clinton made a mistake with her email servers? Yes, I think she made a mistake with her email servers. Do I agree with some of her policy suggestions, particularly when it comes to entirely opening our doors to Syrian refugees right now until we know that we have a vetting system that is airtight? No, I'd like to know that that system is airtight. But does any of that rise to the level of condoning sexually molesting women? No, it doesn't. For very good reason.
Thank you. If you have any questions, please write them down on a card and we'll try to get to them. The next question is, it doesn't say to whom, so I'll assume it's for both of you. Interesting question. Do you think this election is rigged? And I have to add to that, please, if you do, tell us what that means. Okay.
As far as this election in the 1st Congressional District, I don't feel that way at all. We have a lot of diversity here in our district. We have voters with the ability to go to the polls on November 8th and to vote for whoever you want to vote for. And we have a process through our County Board of Elections and the State Board of Elections to ensure that that this process is as open and transparent and fair as possible. So I would encourage everyone to actively participate in the process. I would say that there's a diversity of media covering our district, and there's a diversity of perspectives, and I respect the diversity of perspectives on the election. It's a completely different picture on the presidential level. I mean, you had 17 candidates running in a Republican primary. You had a few candidates running in a Democratic primary. I'm not going to get involved in criticizing exactly the process that was followed in picking the other side's nominee. As far as the Republican side, the primary voters had an opportunity in all these states to weigh in. All 50 states were able to cast votes. There are different processes on how delegates are picked. So I don't feel, as far as the process on the Republican side, that the Republican Party primary process was rigged. I would say right now, our media could be doing all of voters a huge service by talking as much about a diversity of issues, because we need to vet whoever the next president of the United States is, whoever the next commander-in-chief is, on national security, on the economy, on trade, on education, on so much more than what we are seeing right now. But I'm not going to call it names. I'm just saying there's 23 days left, and the national news really needs to vet both of these candidates more than they are. But here in the 1st District, I don't believe so at all.
Would you like to
I
speak
would.
on that?
I think it's an important question, and I think that may be one area where Mr. Zeldin and I agree, and that is that the presidential debates and the entire media coverage around the presidential election has been far too distracted by these issues, and there has not been nearly the kind of attention paid to the questions that really matter to all of us. What are we going to do to protect Social Security and Medicare going into the future? What are we going to do to make sure that there is a tax code in place that protects middle-class taxpayers and doesn't give away the store to the top 1 or 2% of earners in this country, gives away the store to big corporations and oil companies? What are we going to do to make sure that the Affordable Care Act actually gets fixed and it works for everyone? What are we going to do to keep guns out of the hands of the criminal, the mentally ill, domestic abusers, etc.? What are we going to do about climate change? What are we going to do to make sure that college is affordable for all kids in America today? What are we going to do to make sure that every child in the United States of America has access to early childhood education? We aren't talking about any of those things, and we should be talking about those things. What is troubling to me, too, is where we see some states that are trying to enact voter registration, voter ID laws, things of that sort, that courts have now clearly stated were discriminatory in their nature and discriminatory in their intentions. And the number of people who are trying to register the vote, who are not able to do that because the system is backlogged, not properly funded, these are issues that need to be dealt with as well.
Thank you.
We disagree on voter ID, and you need an ID to buy alcohol. You need ID to purchase cigarettes, to fly on a plane. We need IDs in our life to do all sorts of different things. And what is more important than voting? And when I see people who work with a responsibility, their job title is to oversee the process, as the video that came out in the last few days from the New York City elections official bragging at an event, it's all on YouTube, bragging about the way that there are so many different flaws where the process is being taken advantage of in New York City, that motivates me to want to do something about it. In New York State, I drafted legislation, introduced legislation that would scrub the voter rolls of people who are no longer alive. And the criticism that was used against my bill was that I was going to be alienating people. But with all due, we respectfully would disagree on that particular issue. I understand my opponent's position on it. We just have two different takes on it.
So it's important to you that there are licenses, et cetera, for driving cars and buying alcohol, but not for buying guns. Okay. And the fact of the matter is that our criminal justice system
voters.
has reviewed those voter ID laws and have shown that they inordinately affect the poor, the minority, and women voters in the United States of America, and the incidence of voter fraud is absolutely minimal and seldom has anything to do with voter ID.
Okay. I have a question. Do you feel at this time that you might be able to extend your time a few minutes? Because there's one more question I'd love to get in before your closing statement.
Sure.
But if
Sonny
you're tied
Theo
up-
is going to yield me 2 of his minutes.
I'll yield the afternoon today.
You all right with that?
I'm sorry.
Are you all right with
Can I
it?
ask you another question?
Yeah. Are you okay with that, Anna, to extend?
Absolutely.
Okay, there's one more question before the closing statement. And, I mean, today's very popular Alexander Hamilton apparently said, democracy without compromise is unworkable. What could you do to change Congress, or what would you do to change Congress and work for the people?
It's a great question, and you know, everything that I discussed in my opening, the different bills that I've worked on, the stuff that I've gotten passed, every single thing, even when I was up in Albany, I mentioned all different types of bills that we got passed while I was up in Albany and stuff that we've gotten passed while I was down in DC. Those were all directly a result of bipartisanship. I mentioned the Long Island Sound Restoration and Stewardship Act with Congressman Israel for Long Island Sound water quality. When I mentioned the Safe Bridges Act, I introduced that with Sean Patrick Maloney from the Hudson Valley. He worked the minority end of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. I worked the majority end of that committee, and now New York State's going to get $250 million more. I believe that there needs to be more compromise, that there needs to be more bipartisanship. By the way, because a whole lot of different issues, liberals and conservatives are in agreement. The most liberal and the most conservative on so many different things that get proposed and passed, there's total agreement on. What we hear about is the most controversial. If you're one of the national news stations and you want ratings, I'll tell you, the drama, the controversy, partisanship, it sells. The 114th Congress has passed more bills out of committee than the 113th Congress of the 25-year average. The 114th Congress has passed more bills on the House floor than the 113th Congress and the 25-year average. The current Congress has passed more bills that have been signed by the president, Republican Congress, Democratic president. We have passed and signed into law than the 113th Congress or the 25-year average. But you know what? There's a lot more that needs to get done. But as far as compromise and bipartisanship, we can never have too much bipartisanship where you can find common ground to tackle a challenge. And there's a lot more challenges still facing this country. And I'll work with anyone, to find common ground.
Anna?
You know, Lee Zeldin campaigned on that 2 years ago, that he was going to be the big middle grounder, compromiser, get everyone together, get stuff done. And yeah, he's co-sponsored a whole bunch of bills. But again, for those who might not be aware of how that process works, you have your aides, they come in with a stack of bills that your colleagues have put forward and say, do you want to be part of a long list of co-sponsorships? Says yes, it's hitting a button, cut and paste on a computer, and you're a co-sponsor. And yes, when you're in the majority, you can move forward a bunch of stuff. He's gotten one bill passed and signed into law. One. In the meantime, what hasn't worked in Congress today? So much so because of the partisan line that has been drawn by this majority on everything. That is why a recent Gallup poll says that 89% of Americans think that the House of Representatives is not serving them today. They are not getting the job done. Only 11% of Americans feel that Congress today is actually acting on and getting together and getting the job done. Do you think that the sit-in on the House floor on the gun safety issue would have happened if they were coming together? No. This majority, with Mr. Zeldin, got in the way of that. I would do what I did as town supervisor and councilwoman. I walked through the doors on January 1st at Town Hall. I was the only one without an R next to my name. And I was fine with that. I campaigned on being people, not politics. And if I hadn't gotten everyone to work together and be willing to compromise and get the job done, we wouldn't have gotten what we got done. The town of Southampton would not be one of the only AAA-rated towns on Long Island and in New York. We wouldn't have led the way on environmental reform and sustainability. We wouldn't have award-winning senior services, etc.
Okay, I think we've come to the point where the candidates have an opportunity to make a closing statement. And I don't know if I should flip a coin or the two of you can decide who should go first. Any preference?
You choose.
I'll flip a coin.
Okay.
Anna, would you call?
Tails.
Tails?
Tails.
It's tails. It's your choice.
I'll go last.
I'm sorry, you'll go last?
I'll go last. Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, thank you to CCOM for hosting today, for all of you for being here to participate in the democratic process. My opponent just now at the end of her statement was talking about how well she gets along with people. And it's important to note that every single person that she served with, Republicans and Democrats, that no one has supported her campaign. Two of her former Democratic town board members actively endorsed her opponent in their Democratic primary. I believe that it's really important to work well with people, actually, where you come to the public to talk about issues that you want to tackle, and that's actually more important than spending an entire debate on every question that you're asked, immediately pivoting to attacking your opponent. I believe that these debates should be entirely focused on the entire answer, directly answering the question, and talk about how you're going to tackle the issues that are facing our country and our community. And by the way, the local town board here, it's Democratic town supervisor, Democratic controlled town board, and I've enjoyed working with them on important issues for our shared constituents. We don't always agree on a lot of different issues, but you know what? We work together to get stuff done. Lake Montauk, and when the local community and the town decides that they want alternative number 5, well then guess what? That means that I now support alternative number 5. When the town comes to me and they say, we're having trouble, we want to work with the Army Corps and the New York State DEC so that we can dredge between Hog Creek and Gardner's Bay, and the Clearwater Beach Property Owners Association needs this for a maintenance dredge, can you help? We got it done. When Montauk Lighthouse is in need of an $18 million project for stone revetment, we are now on a pace where the study is due by end of the year, the design is done at the beginning of next year, and by a year from now, they're supposed to be completing the project. When East Hampton Town enacting aircraft noise restrictions, and my opponent opposed East Hampton Town's enactment of aircraft noise restrictions publicly, I told East Hampton Town, not only do I have your back, I got the House to pass a legislative proposal that specifically says the FAA cannot take negative action against East Hampton town officials for the enactment of aircraft noise restrictions. This is what I hope, that when we get to November 9th, the day after the election, that we can focus entirely on just solving the challenges before you, because that is 5 million times more important than so much that we're seeing on TV and the attacks that you hear here. And we need to actually get along with the people that we work around, whether they agree with us or not. And we need to move our community, state, and country forward in a positive way, whether you vote for me or not. Thank you all for being here.
This is indeed an election of our lifetime. The differences between the candidates on the presidential level and the differences between the candidates right here in District 1 on the congressional level are about as stark as they come. And you have a choice. And let's talk about District 1 and the congressional race. You have the opportunity to put someone in place who has fought the fight for 8 years in local government and has gotten a plan for Southampton Town in place, the Sustainability 400 plan, which will lead the way decades into the future in shepherding our environment and environmental policy. Someone who put the Clean Water Technology Center at Stony Brook University in place that will be a job leader, but also be a national center for dealing with retrofit technology to deal with the nitrogen loading that is clogging our waterways today. That put a solarizing program